Hey, hello. Welcome to episode number 75 of the People We Love podcast. I am Adam Choit. What's up? If you're new here, what I do is interview people from all walks of life, often comedians and other artists, about their lives and careers. It's casual conversation, but I also ask everyone to highlight someone they love, someone who they admire, who influenced them, inspired them, or supported them. For more, check out peoplewelovepodcast.com. That's peoplewelovepodcast.com, and the Instagram handle is peoplewelovepodcast. And you can find me on Instagram as well, at Adam Choit, if you want to follow me too. And remember to tap subscribe or follow on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on. So, today's guest is comedian Paige Weldon. Growing up in the shadow of LA in Temecula, California, she recalls watching stand-up comedy on Comedy Central, watching Tivo recordings of Gabriel, Iglesias, and Mitch Hedberg, and others over and over again. She made her way to UCLA, started doing the open mic at Meltdown Comics on Sunset, and one thing led to another. And Paige's mom and dad have always been there for her too, and been super supportive. And they're fans of comedy as well. Let's just get started with Paige Weldon. So it's good to see you today, Paige Weldon. Thanks for joining me on the Zoom here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, I appreciate it. How are you holding up during this really fun 2020?
Oh, I'm, fine.
You're fine.
Yeah. Racked with anxiety like everybody, but fine.
Do you normally have anxiety?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's me.
So this must be fun.
Oh, yeah.
All you need is added stress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But, I'm good. I'm holding up fine.
When was the last time you were on stage doing stand-up?
It was March 11th. I know the specific date. I did a show at a vintage store in Highland Park. And then, I remember I was supposed to do a show the next day and it was canceled, and then everything was canceled thereafter.
Right.
Yeah.
You must miss it.
Oh, I miss it terribly. I love stand-up comedy. I miss everything about it. I think at first it was like just a shock, the whole situation, that I wasn't even really thinking about it, but it's definitely been long enough now that it's really set in how much I miss that part of my life.
What, do you see other comedians going insane because they haven't been able to get that audience response, the live audience response? It's like a fix almost. Is it a fix in some regard?
Yeah, I think it's a strange thing to have your main creative outlet just kind of not exist anymore. And there are these Zoom shows and everything, which have been kind of a nice Band-Aid on the situation, but it's not the same. And you also don't get, like, something I have missed is, doing comedy. I just miss seeing people, there's people who I'm close with who I've been good about keeping in touch with, but then there's, that second ring of people in your life who you go, well, I just expect to see them at shows or whatever. And yeah, I miss that community.
Yeah. It stinks.
Yeah.
Hopefully soon.
I know shows are starting to happen with, precautions in place. I'm curious to see.
Outside is LA or in LA?
I feel like I've seen them outside of LA. And then Chappelle just put out that thing where he recorded something with everyone outside.
Oh, yeah.
So I definitely think we're going to start seeing some socially distant outdoor shows happening, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's strange with audience members so far apart. It seems like such a thing with comedy is packing them in.
Yes,
part of the whole culture.
Very hard to. I would imagine. I guess I haven't done one, but I would imagine it's hard to get a rolling laugh going when everyone's so far apart.
Yeah, that's.
But who knows?
Well, I mean, everyone will be going by the same. I guess everyone won't be going by the same like judgment bar or whatever, the same bar, because you don't know. Every club, every place is gonna have a different standard. Maybe, who knows? And
yeah,
it makes it hard. That's tough. Why don't we go back though and get into your life, and you could tell me your life story. Born and raised in Temecula, you said.
Yeah.
Driving home from the hospital. What do you remember from that? From
Well,
0 years old.
I was actually born in San Diego at the Naval Hospital. I was a C-section. I was breech. Do you know what that means?
That's like with your feet. That's feet. Was that feet first?
Feet first, yeah. So I had to be a C-section, and I don't remember driving home from the hospital. But
You didn't drive?
no, I did not have my license yet, just my permit.
Okay.
So not okay for me to drive. But we lived in San Diego till I was 3 or 4, and I don't really remember it too well. But then we moved to Temecula, and yeah, I lived there until I was 17, moved out for a minute, then moved back and moved out when I was 19. But yeah, Temecula is just like a suburb in the Inland Empire. Pretty standard.
Did you go to well, I was gonna ask, what do you remember, like, even being in like elementary school? Like, what kind of kid were you? 4, 5, 6, early years, young.
I've always been, I was always a good student, real smarty pants. I still remember in kindergarten, I had this teacher I loved, and I always thought I was such a good kid. And one time she thought I was talking in the middle of class, and she yelled at me, but it was actually someone else, and I was truly devastated. So I think I've always been kind of like a people pleaser in that regard, wanting to be perfect. That kind of little kid.
Did you ever get justice for this?
No.
Injustice?
No, I learned to put it behind me. I don't know. I'm also an only child, and I've been told that affects your psyche somehow. I'm not sure how. But yeah, and we're sorry.
No, I was gonna ask, were you like the smartest kid in school, like kind of thing?
I was not like overachiever, but I definitely always like had good grades and was a lot was expected of me.
By whom? Your parents?
Yeah, I wasn't. You do your homework when you get home, that kind of thing, which I'm so grateful for. I feel like it really it really instilled good habits in me. I'm not a procrastinator. Yeah.
I feel like you don't hear a lot of people even say those words. I'm not a procrastinator. Most people are, or they'll be like, yeah, sometimes. Like, most people won't go out of their way to tell you that they're not. Well, I asked, but like most people will not say that. And you've always been that way.
I also feel like I've never really been asked what kind of kid I was, and it really got me thinking, like, what was I like as a kid? And then that, of course, makes me ask, how did that inform who I am now? But I was definitely a creative little kid. I like, painting and drawing, and we also had we always had cats and dogs. And I love animals. Yeah.
You were saying that your creative influences came more from your mom's side before we started recording?
Yeah. My mom's real creative. My grandma, her mother, is very creative. She sews. She makes a lot of purses. She's very talented at sewing. And her father, my great grandfather, who I knew when I was little, he would make these like wood crafts. I still have this. I have this little dog house he made that says, our dog at the time, Hannah, says Hannah on it. Yeah.
That's cool. So were you making things and you were doing creative things with your grandmother and your great grandfather, like when you were young? Were you like doing creative things with them, or was it more just like they were doing? What were you doing different creative things than them? You said you were painting and doing that, I guess.
Yeah, well, we always did like arts and crafts and stuff. Yeah. I feel like I didn't actually start drawing and doing my own stuff until I was maybe like in high school. But I always was interested in it. Earlier on, I feel like I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. When I was very little, I played soccer. That was my extracurricular. And then I one day decided that was not cool anymore, and I wanted to take guitar lessons. But then that was too hard. So I took bass lessons, which I also gave up on. And then I kind of never really.
You gotta try things.
Yeah, I regret quitting bass. How cool would it be if I knew how to play bass? I mean, so impressive.
All musicians are cool.
I just think I wish I had one skill like that. Like I can draw, but I'm like, I wish I had I wish I could skateboard or play an instrument or something.
So you're saying you're not musically inclined or athletically inclined? Is that what you're getting at?
That's fair to say. Yeah.
Do you sing?
No.
No. And do act also, or are you mostly doing stand up and
I have acted.
Yeah.
I mean, I never really like set out to be an actor, but
Right.
when you do comedy, you just kind of end up also doing acting. It's kind of like the old Mitch Hedberg joke of you're great at stand up. Can you do all these other things?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what LA is. And I've been really grateful for it. I mean, I've been in some fun stuff.
No singing and dancing though, no musical theater.
No. I don't care for musicals. Not into it.
What about your dad's influence on you? Your mom's side was the creative side, and your dad was a Navy man. Was that where the non-procrastinating side came from, perhaps?
Maybe. I don't know. I've truly never thought about it. That just brought something out of me, I guess. Your question. My dad was in the Navy for many years. My dad's a very he's like basically Hank Hill. He's like very handy. And he's also, I feel like more of what I get from my dad is very sweet and sensitive. And my parents are both very funny. Like, my dad is a little goofier, but my mom will make like a dark joke or something.
They got their own style.
But I definitely get I think I get a lot of my personality from my dad. And my chin.
And your chin.
Yeah.
Go on.
He can grow a beard over his small chin, whereas I cannot.
Have you tried? You haven't tried yet?
I've tried. I've really thought beard thoughts, and it just hasn't happened.
You tried. What about what were you watching on like TV? What sort of like influence did you have? Were you a TV kid? Movies? Like, was doing stand up even a thought in your mind when you were like, elementary school, middle school age? Was it
middle school? I did start watching a lot of. So I'm not sure the exact timing, but sometime like late middle school, early high school, I got a Tivo in my room, and I had this little silver TV, and I would record every single Comedy Central Presents. And that's when I like started learning about stand up, and I saw like comedians of comedy and like all that kind of stuff. But before that, I feel like I didn't really think about stand up, and I didn't really think of stand up as a thing you could do until I started coming up to LA occasionally and going to comedy shows. And then when I moved to LA for college, I started going to the open mic at Meltdown. I don't know if you remember Meltdown Comics when they had the
on Sunset, right?
Yeah, that's where I started doing comedy. But before that, I mean, I definitely. I'm trying to think of what I watched when I was a kid. I mean, Clarissa Explains It All, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, all the classics.
Yeah, a lot of people I've interviewed, comedians, have mentioned the Comedy Central Presents, the Friday night, just the specials that they would have, like being a big influence and remembering watching those. And
oh yeah,
and you just recorded them not because you were studying comedy, not because you just loved them and thought they were funny and just wanted to watch them over and over again.
Oh yeah, there's so many of those that I watched like a million times. I watched the Mitch Hedberg one a ton of times. I've seen the Gabriel Iglesias one a lot. I feel like I have so ingrained in my memory him doing the act out of going up the roller coaster. I don't know if you've seen it.
I think I've seen that on like little Facebook like videos.
He does like an act out of like of like going up that. And Mitch Hedberg, I feel like I memorize all those jokes. And yeah, I was obsessed with those. I would watch them over and over.
Yeah, I did some of the same things. Like back in the day, I would record like 90s SNL episodes or some stand-up comedy, like on VHS tapes.
Oh yeah. Well, we used to do that. I mean, I still remember we didn't have Comedy Central when I was younger, and my mom would ask my grandma because they did have Comedy Central, she would ask her to record on tape South Park for us so we could watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mom's into that stuff, so I think she definitely led me towards some of that.
Your dad wasn't into South Park?
No, I don't think he was.
not that you recall. So,
I feel like he was not down.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. In high school, you said you were kind of watching stand up. When did it first become like a thought in your mind? Like, when you said when you came to LA to visit to do what?
Yeah, so when I was
college or whatever.
So when I was I initially went to UC Santa Barbara for straight out of high school because I didn't really get in anywhere I wanted to go, and so I went up at Santa Barbara, and I don't know, it's like a big party school, and that's just not really my vibe, and I pretty quickly was like, I should not do this. So I dropped out and I went to community college for 1.5 years back in Temecula. Got my old job back at the library, which was my high school job. And then transferred to UCLA. But during the time when I was at community college and working at the library, I would go up to LA and I had some friends who lived there, and we would go to comedy shows. And sort of through that, I learned that an open mic was starting at Meltdown, and it was like right around the time I moved to LA, and I just tried it.
So you were at UCLA at this time?
Yeah, so I moved to LA the summer before I started at UCLA, and that's when I started doing comedy. And then I never forget, fall came around, and I was like, oh, I really do not want to go study psychology.
You just wanted to do comedy and live your life.
Yeah, I mean, I was so in love with it. That's all I wanted to do.
Were you writing a lot up until the time you first performed? Your first ever performance was at Meltdown?
Yeah, at their open mic. They used to do an open mic on Sundays. It was called Matt Myra's Day Off. Matt Myra hosted it with Paul Sebis. And yeah, I would go on Sundays to that mic, and I every week would write like a new 3 minutes for that mic. That was kind of how I first started. I didn't really like get into the thing where I was doing a mic every night until maybe a couple months in.
Yeah, tell me about do you remember anything from that first time doing it and the time period leading up to that? Were you nervous? Were you worried? Were you writing a lot?
Yeah, I mean, so the previous week I had gone to the mic with my friends who already lived in LA, and they went up. They were interested in doing it, and I hadn't really even thought about doing it, but I just was so excited by it. And I remember I drove back down to Temecula knowing I was going to move up there the following weekend, and I started thinking about a set that I could do. And yeah, I wrote this like ridiculous 3-minute thing about, I was making fun of The Bachelor, which I feel like at the time I was just, because I was living at home, I was just, my mom was always watching The Bachelor, and I just loved, shitting on it. And so I wrote this like 3-minute surrealist bit about how the reason all the women on The Bachelor really want a rose is because the rose is actually the only sustenance they're provided during that time. So they're all starving. And I wrote this like 3-minute thing based on that. It's like this absurd thing. When I first started doing comedy, everything I did was like really absurd and like ridiculous. But I remember I went up like very last at the mic, but it was one of the early weeks of the mic, and everyone was so excited about it that like everyone stayed. So my set like went pretty well. And so I often wonder if it hadn't gone well, like where I would have gone from there, but I remember a group of us like went across the street to this Thai place and hung out, and everyone, like there were a couple people who were like, that was your first time? I can't believe it. Which I'm not trying to brag. I really don't think I was
No,
very good.
that's a great compliment though to hear
Yeah,
for sure.
but I think that
Ultimate one.
definitely fueled me, you know.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like people do well the first time though. Did people know it was your first time? Because when the audience knows it's a comedian's first time, then that could be, they tend to be more supportive.
I
kind of
don't
heard and
think
seen.
that was announced. I didn't tell anyone. I think I was just last at the mic. It was just like a good, I think it was good timing because it was probably like maybe the second or third week of that open mic. And it was something that I think a lot of comics had been wanting because they had their Wednesday show there, their big show. And I think a lot of comics would hang out at that show, but there was no mic. And so when it started, I think there was enough enthusiasm that like it was just lucky that I started right then.
Yeah, I want to go back. You said in college, or I don't know when you made this decision, that you were studying psychology, you said?
Yeah, that was my major in college. I really I didn't know what I wanted to do. It was just kind of expected that I would go to college. And so I I didn't know what my major would be when I started. And then when I was going to community college and living back at home, I just really wanted to make sure that I could transfer in the 2-year period so I wouldn't get stuck living at home for an additional year. So I ended up picking psych because it just seemed like the easiest thing to get the credits done at community college in time. I really just figured I didn't really think very much about it. I still remember because I worked at the library and I worked with this woman, Susan, who she was kind of like a crotchety old lady who didn't really like anyone, but she liked me. And I really took pride in that. And I remember, I remember telling her when I was leaving for UCLA, she asked what I was majoring in and I said psychology. And she goes, that's a cop out. And I was like, man, Susan, you really saw it for what it was. I just picked something.
Wow. So what did your parents think of your major and your general direction? I mean, and in life, I mean, I guess you're still a student, you're still kind of figuring things out, but they were like, what are you going to do with your life after college? Did they hear about when you first did comedy? Did you talk to them about it? So talk about the stand up the first time and the, you kind of pursuing psychology.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, neither of my parents went to college. I don't think I think they were just glad I was going.
Right.
Because also I was lucky that I got like really good financial aid. And so it wasn't costing them like hardly anything. And so I think they were just happy I was going. And I think they were also happy that I moved back out.
Yeah.
So and they are generally very supportive and they actually, when I started doing comedy, and ever since I started doing comedy, have basically just thought it was cool. And I think I've had enough success in it that they've never been particularly worried about me doing it. But yeah.
Cool. So did you end up actually finishing college, or did you just start doing comedy like after 3 months in college and doing comedy? Like, I'm just going to do comedy full time, forget school. Like what?
No, I finished school.
You did.
I finished school. I basically, so when I transferred, I was, a junior in college, and it was fairly easy to balance doing school stuff and doing comedy. So during that first year or so, I did a lot of comedy. And it didn't really interfere either direction. And then senior year, I found that it was a lot harder because I was trying to finish up all my credits. And so it fell a little by the wayside, especially like the very end of my senior year of college. But then as soon as I graduated, it was like, all bets are off. I'm doing this all the time. And I got like a temp job to have money in the day.
So towards the end of your senior year or whatever, you're saying that it was kind of like hard to like, you couldn't give comedy the attention that you wanted to,
yeah,
because of your studies.
Yeah, and really, it's like technically I started, when I did, but I feel like, a lot of the friends I have in comedy are from right after I graduated, because I was like hitting mics every single night. And so I made a lot of friends who were like starting then.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. And where did the journey kind of go from there? You said you're doing some like temp work and you're doing the comedy. Like, what did reality hit you in the face? Was it like, did you have successes right away? Was it ups and downs? Like, what was kind of like the right out of college?
Out of college, so I knew a bunch of comedians who had registered with this one temp agency. And it was like, at first I was having a bit of a hard time getting anything long-term, but I would get like things that were like a week or a day or two. I would often get assigned to receptionist work. Just like, a day where like their receptionist was out. So I would do that day answering phones. And then I don't remember how long it was after college, I ended up landing this technically temp gig, being the receptionist at this voiceover studio in Santa Monica. And that was full time. But after, I think I worked there like 8 or 9 months. And then they fired me unceremoniously because they didn't want to have to hire me full time. They're one of these companies that like takes advantage of temp workers because they like don't have to give them benefits or anything.
Yeah.
So that was when reality set in, where I was like, oh no, I have no money. I believe my car's transmission blew out around that same time. All kinds. It's always when it rains, it pours.
Right. Were you able to get any material out of these struggles?
Oh yeah, I mean,
inspiration?
I'm sure. I feel like I don't remember any specific ones, but I definitely feel like, I don't know. I think that it's good to have something like that happen to you because you have to figure it out. And I feel like ever since then I've been like so good about saving money and making sure that kind of thing never happens to me again. But yeah.
No, that's good. So you've learned from your journey on your comedy journey.
Yeah.
What about after those early years, sort of after that? What were some of either the highlights or even the ups and downs, or what jumps out at you about in general in your LA comedy life?
Man, I mean, so it's such a blur. I feel like, because especially since I haven't been doing comedy for the last 3 months or whatever, it's like, what even is comedy anymore? But I just made a lot of good friends. I would do like, we'd go plan a week where we go, like, one of my favorite things I've done is 4 summers ago now, my friend Rachel Mack got married, and so me and some friends, other comics, we went to the wedding, and we also we planned a trip where we did shows in Chicago that week because it was like near Chicago. I feel like those are some of the most fun times in the sort of like middle period of doing comedy, is planning those, like, all right, this week we're going to San Francisco and we're driving up and we're going to do all the shows, yeah. And just being at mics super late. I definitely got wistful the other day about, I used to go to these certain mics and just be there all night,
You're getting emotional. Are you an emotional person, would you say? I mean, that's a general question. I would say
so. Sure. Yeah, I think so. I mean, because in a way, like, I'm basically just talking about, this is just what I'm basically trying to recall my 20s up till now. I'm still in my 20s, but yeah, it's memories, man.
It's funny to talk about those trips with like comedian friends. Like, it's like a road trip, it's like a vacation, but it's also like you have that other element. It's like, we're gonna go perform and like get all this attention on us.
Yeah, I mean, it's like
deservedly so. It's earned, and that's a cool little element added to like a vacation or a trip or whatever the case may be.
It's like the fun thing you do when you're like, I'm not really booked on a ton of shows in LA all the time. I'm doing mics all the time. Me and my friends just want to like go and be booked on shows every night for a week. And So those are always really fun, especially even though you're, making no money, you're losing money and you're staying with other comics who live in the city or whatever. I feel like I'm like, I'll never do one of those again, but they were very fun.
Or like the road trip style.
Yeah,
Whatever.
because the honest thing is, it's like, I mean, fingers crossed, knock on wood, but I had started to get to a point where I was like making money, doing comedy on occasion. And so once that starts to happen, it feels hard to go back.
You have to prioritize your time really for what makes most sense and what's rewarding.
Yeah.
Financially or otherwise. Yeah.
Totally.
No, for sure. And your parents, you said, have just always been super supportive, and they love comedy, and they're funny people, and they're just kind of along for the ride with you. Do they see you perform a lot? They live out in Temecula and come visit, or once in a while?
They have seen me perform. I think my mom has seen me perform a couple of times. So when I was first doing comedy, my parents, part of why I think they were glad that I moved out is at the time my dad was working pretty far from Temecula, so he had a big commute. So as soon as I moved out, they moved still pretty close to LA, but closer to where he was working. And so my mom would come down occasionally and visit and maybe come to a show. But she's also, and I do love her so much, but she's a bit of a loud person, and I had to sort of train her not to speak during comedy shows, which, she's totally figured out by now. And then, so one time they both came out to a show because I did a show right near where they were living, and at this brewery. And they're like, it's so funny. I remember like being nervous because, my comedy is not like filthy by any means, but it's hard not to be self-conscious a little bit. And I remember after my set, or before my set, I think I had tried to like preface, like, I'm not going to be like filthy, but I hope nothing bothers you. And my dad goes, I've seen what you post on Facebook, which cracked me up.
Yeah, they knew what they were getting themselves.
He's like, I know what you joke about, whatever. And they also, I think it's more in recent years. They've both been comedy fans in the past, but they love like Bill Burr. Like they'll go see him when he comes to town where they live, and I know they like went and saw Tiffany Haddish once. They'll like go see They saw Jerry Seinfeld.
They're fans. Yeah, they're comedy fans. They're comedy fans too. That's cool.
So I think they think it's cool, and I've never, ever since truly the only time in my adult life I've been like, I need to borrow money is that time when I lost that job and my car broke down, and I've never borrowed money from them since.
Yeah, that's cool.
So I think that there hasn't been really cause for alarm. So they just think they're really supportive.
And it sounds like they like your material and they think you're funny.
Yeah. I mean, my mom listens to my podcast every week.
Yeah, because some parents and some family members, they're like, oh, I love my cousin, I love my son, I love my daughter, whatever, and I want all the best for them. But, their comedy's not really, it's not really for me. Like, you can get that with parents, with family members.
No, totally. I think I feel like I speak to way more comedians who are like, my parents think it's horrible that I'm doing comedy, or they think it's vulgar or whatever. I feel like that's way more often what you hear. So I know I'm super lucky in that regard. For
sure. And what would you say is like your either dreams, goals, aspirations for, assuming comedy comes back in somewhat of a similar way it was in the past, like as far as your goals, career, dreams, aspirations. I did see that you've had quite a bit of success already, being on James Corden show and all that. We're watching your stuff for sure.
Well, thanks. That's very nice. I definitely, I would say it's sort of hard to picture right now, just because I don't know what comedy is going to be. But I definitely would love to do another late night set if and when that is a thing again. I had right before everything shut down, I had this specific set actually about my parents that I was really excited about. I had written this whole 5-minute piece about them and me being an only child that I thought was like a really lovely little packaged 5 minutes that would make a great late night set. And I had like just gotten it on tape and was like trying to send it around, and then everything shut down. So I would definitely say like I would love to get another set on TV is a big goal of mine. And yeah, I mean, in general, my goal is just I'd love to be a headliner. And that's what I want to do.
The getting on TV is more of a means to the end, to getting exposure, just to getting bigger gigs, higher paying gigs, and on the road. Is that something you're looking to do on the road, or make a special? Like, what is like the priority with those two?
Definitely, I feel like I would like to. I guess tour is the wrong word, but I would like to be working regularly as a stand-up because it's like I did record an album a few years ago, but it wasn't like I was a headliner who had been doing this hour for a year or something. You know, I feel like before I ever record an album or anything again, I want to have done that hour a few times. I don't know. I had started like, you know, I there's a number of people I open for and things like that, but I haven't done a ton of my own headlining. So that's definitely a big goal of mine. And, you know, in LA and I guess New York as well, there's also the writing job opportunities. I worked as a writer's assistant on a show. So I'd really like to be able to bump up and actually be staffed at some point, you know, these things.
If you were, when you say headlining, what is that? 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour? It depends on the club. What is that?
45 to an hour.
45 to an hour.
Which I've headlined at colleges. That's where I've gotten most of my work making money doing stand up is playing colleges. But that's not really that's never the 45 to an hour that you truly want to do, because it has to be relatively clean
for college.
Yeah.
So it's not that when you say it's not the 45 to an hour you want to do, it's not like you have to censor your own act or sort of edit your own act. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, you just kind of, I feel like whenever I do a college, I end up doing old bits or something because I'm trying to avoid doing anything. You know, usually colleges you get there and they're like, yeah, you can kind of do, but like, it's not super strict, but you know, you don't want to say something that gets the person who ran the show in trouble because they were told the show would be PG-13 or whatever, you know, so you just want to be extra careful. Whereas if you're at a club, it's kind of like clubs are just it's more where comedy should be, really. Like oftentimes, like there have been times you go to a college when I've gone to perform at a college and they have this killer setup. It's in like, you know, a basement where like, it's like perfect low ceilings and that comedy vibe that you need. And then sometimes you go and it's like you're performing in a lecture hall and it's, you know, it's still fun, but it's a little different.
Yeah, it's so, you know, interesting, amazing, not the right word, interesting how the room, just the space itself can have such an effect on the performance and how the comedian's ability to perform.
Totally.
What are also some of the challenges that you've come, you know, had with comedy, just in the room itself? Some of the maybe nightmare stories, tough rooms, or crazy audiences, hecklers, or strange gigs.
I'm trying to think. I know I was just remembering that, you know, it turned out fine, but I remember the first ever college I booked. It was like, it turned out there was like some kind of like a alumni event going on or something. So there were people with their kids, and there was a kid in the audience for the first one I did. And I had to kind of like figure out how to, because, you know, beyond the usual concerns with being relatively clean, it was like, oh, now there's a child in the audience. So that was an interesting one.
Some comedians must just be like, fuck it, there's a kid. Literally, I mean, no pun intended.
It depends on the environment. It depends. Like, you know, obviously if there are certain shows where if you brought your kid, that's on you. You shouldn't have done that. Whereas this, it was like, I was really nervous because, you know, it was the first time I was getting paid to perform at a college. And I really didn't want to mess it up, which I did not. And that was exciting. But that was another one where it was like in a ballroom that was like set up for an event the next day, where it wasn't like seating like in rows. It was like big round tables where people were going to have dinner for an event the following night or something, so that's always interesting. I don't know. I'm not really a comic that gets heckled very often. It doesn't really happen to me.
And you haven't had a lot of nightmare stories with weird gigs or anything, because that was not too bad,
I feel like I block them out. I mean, I've definitely done horrible shows. There used to be this place. There's another thing that's very fun about when you're in the phase of comedy where you're doing open mics and stuff all the time. There were certain mics and that I loved going to because they were kind of terrible. There's this bar in like Burbank-ish area, like Burbank, Glendale, around there. It's like by the train track, and it's called Big Fish. And it's it's like the ultimate dive bar. And I used to go there, and there were these like weird old guys who would hang out and kind of, say things to you during your set. And, but at the time, like all my friends would go, and, we would all just do this terrible mic. There's also a place called Liquid Zoo in the Valley.
I know the Liquid Zoo for sure.
I used to go to Liquid Zoo every single Sunday, cause they gave you 7 minutes, and that was awesome. That was one of my favorite, terrible is the wrong word for Liquid Zoo. Liquid Zoo could be really bad if you were there late, but it's definitely like a dive. Like there's weird people.
I think you just called the other one terrible, if I recall. Maybe I could have missed something.
Yeah. Big Fish was terrible.
Yeah.
Liquid Zoo was sometimes really valuable, and that's why I kept going.
I mean, does it all have value going, even like these dingy dive bars with bad audience members? Does it all build your character, your strength, your endurance, your ability to bounce back? Does it all have, even if you get booed and bombed, is there still value in that? Or is it
definitely
is it ever also sometimes like, I could have done without that, I don't need the character building right now?
Well, I think that there's a time period where it is very valuable, and then I think that I definitely hit a point in comedy where I feel like there have been times where I've been like, you know what? I'm going too hard. Like I'm just doing this every night several times just for the sake of doing it. And I'm making myself hate it. And I've had to be like, okay, maybe pull back a little bit. I feel like that's just kind of the natural progression for a lot of people is there's a period in comedy, ideally, if you're really trying to get good at stand-up comedy where you're going to mics every single night. And there definitely also comes a point where you go like, you know what, this is maybe not helping me. But then you have to make sure you don't get too complacent, etc.
Life is hard. So much delicate balance and nuance to it.
Mm-hmm. It's true. Turns out.
Why is it so hard? You don't have the answers?
Oh, I wish I did. Yeah.
You didn't anticipate me asking that question.
No, you're asking the deep questions.
Yeah, why is life hard? I thought you would just be asking me about my childhood in comedy.
Maybe because of original sin. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not a Christian, but I've heard that as an explanation.
Either am I. I didn't do anything. I didn't do it. But on that note, I definitely appreciate your time. It's been fun. Is there anything else that you think we should cover? I think we covered a lot. Comedy, Temecula, your parents' influence.
Yeah, I mean, I know I bounced around. I feel like you tried to get me to go chronological, and I kind of went all over the place.
No, we did. I mean, there's been more people who did more bouncing and more extreme bouncing all over the place. So I think you done good.
Okay, well then good. Then I think
don't
we're
need
good.
to worry. So why don't you, before you head on with your evening, why don't you tell me where people can find you, follow you, anything else you're working on, you want to promote? I'll give you the floor.
Just follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Paige Weldon. I post cartoons on Instagram that I draw, and you can also listen to. I have a podcast called Mall Talk. We talk about the mall, so find that wherever you listen to podcasts. And and you can also, if you If you listen to my album on Pandora, I get money. So listen to my album on Girlfriend. It's called Girlfriend at the Time.
That's cool. I follow you and your cartoons. They're awesome. Like, do you draw them every day? Draw them in advance, or like? Seems like it's pretty like real time-ish.
Yeah, it's been varied. I mean, I used to draw cartoons all the time. That was like kind of what I wanted to do before I did comedy. And then I used to do cartoons for this website I used to do, this like comedy website myself and a friend used to run. And then I kind of fell off of it for a while, and I realized it was like kind of a New Year's resolution to start drawing again and posting them.
That's fun. I think a lot of people appreciate like that. I don't know, just having that regular content, I think, is like helpful. It's like there's so much uncertainty in this world, like knowing that you're going to at least get a cartoon, regularly. It helps.
Also, there's its own set of, anxiety around posting something you worked really hard on, but I find it to be more fun than posting pictures of myself.
Yeah. You can do both.
I can do a little of both, yeah.
Photos of you holding your drawings.
Yeah.
Cover it all.
Coming soon.
I definitely appreciate the time, and I'll let you enjoy the rest of your evening, and talk soon.
All right. Thanks. You too.
So there you have it, my conversation with Paige Weldon. That was fun. I appreciate her time for sure. Her childhood reminds me of mine in a lot of ways, filled with family, creative projects, and quitting things I didn't like. Anyway, for everything about this show, of course, head to peoplewelovepodcast.com. And I think that's about all I got for today. I appreciate you guys listening. Thanks as always. And let's talk soon. Peace.